Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the rapidly fracturing UK as a result of the Conservatives' callous disregard for its peoples, and discuss what might be practical ideas that people have proposed for modernising the Union in a way that helps reconnect people. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So yeah, I get that a lot of people here actively want the UK to break up, and many others are at least resigned to it. I am neither. I am in favour of uniting people, not dividing them. Divide and rule is frankly a Tory trick, not at all in the interests of the common good. But let's face facts, it's all looking a bit rubbish right now. Now, before I get properly started, I do think I should also state my position on Ireland, because that's a little bit different. So for those who aren't sure about it, when I say I'm a unionist, that doesn't necessarily mean regarding Northern Ireland. See, the reason I'm in favour of the United Kingdom of Great Britain is because the alternative is that we are all just three smaller, diminished bits of an island on the world stage. This is not the case for Northern Ireland. If Northern Ireland breaks away from the UK, it is understood that it is to reunify with the rest of Ireland. If it was to just become an independent bit of a different island, in my view, that would be silly. But the fact of the matter is that Northern Ireland, being part of the Republic of Ireland, works perfectly well. Northern Ireland, part of the UK, part of the Republic of Ireland, it's part of something. And that's it as far as I'm concerned. And it's not up to me what would happen anyway. I'm not Irish. That's for the people of Northern Ireland. And of course, it is also for the people in the different nations of Britain to decide whether they are together or apart. But as together is always stronger, what is needed is to make people feel that they are benefiting from that strength, to make people feel connected. Because right now they're not. People in Scotland, Wales and England are simply not connected. People will talk about how those in Scotland or Wales are having to accept certain things because of the convenience of England. This is not true. The north of England, for example, is the least connected part of the UK, and the pandemic has highlighted this in no small measure. The pandemic in the UK has been characterised by infighting between all administrations. You know, the Scottish Government, Welsh Government, Northern Irish Assembly have all at various times been very much at odds with the UK Government in Westminster under Boris Johnson. And I wouldn't put it down to party politicking either. Frankly, Boris Johnson is an arse, I get that. But all of those administrations have also had the power to do a lot of things their own way. Then you look at England. So take last summer and autumn, when much of the north of England was suffering under what was effective lockdown. People talk about the lockdown ended just before summer last year. No, it didn't in the north of England. And with little financial support. So you had then regional champions like Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, calling on the government to step up support for the region. He got nothing. In fact, you know what? He got less than nothing. In an act of pure spite and simply to put the political boot into people who had the nerve to vote Labour, Boris Johnson looked at the area and went, well, you lot vote Labour, I'm not helping you, and provided even less than the standard inadequate levels of financial support. Because that's what we have, ladies and gentlemen, a childish government. Similarly, in London, which also largely votes Labour and where there is a Labour mayor, they had powers removed as well, on a whim, by Boris Johnson's government. In Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, you have tussles, but each of those administrations also has the power to put in place policies that Westminster cannot interfere with. Is that good enough? No, because quite frankly, we should have had a concerted effort in terms of the pandemic. Take a recent example. So, when Scotland introduced travel restrictions into Scotland, so the quarantine for a period of time, and I saw a report of a flight from Istanbul to Edinburgh, I believe, somewhere in Scotland, I believe it was Edinburgh, and there were supposed to be 66 people on that flight. There ended up being 6. What happened to the other 60? Did they perhaps get an alternative flight, let's say to Manchester Airport, where they could touch down, and because the rules in England are different, not have to quarantine and then just drive or get a train to Edinburgh, bypassing the whole thing? It's an absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense that, you know, it's not enough. But what Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have is better than what we have in England. A large part of the English Brexit vote was put down to this lack of a voice. But I'm not trying to argue woe is England and the rest of the UK don't know how good they've got it. Simply that the whole of the UK can be disenfranchised by a corrupt, childish, selfish government. It's a bit like Trump in America. They had a number of conventions that governed the limits of presidential power, but that's all they were, conventions. When it came down to it, we saw with Trump, there were no real checks in place against a corrupt president if backed by their equally corrupt party in Congress. Same thing in the UK. Our constitution doesn't actually protect us against this. We work on the basis that Parliament shouldn't allow a corrupt government to be corrupt, but they do because they're part of the same party. A left-wing think tank, the Scottish Fabian, suggested that what's needed is a new Act of Union, one that codifies a number of areas currently somewhat ambiguous. And this would also include, on matters in terms of seceding from the Union. So Northern Ireland, for example, there is a process sort of laid down as part of the Good Friday Agreement. But if devolution is to mean anything, it also has to mean that the individual nations of the UK need to be given rather more respect. Not as a promise, because we know what they're worth, especially from Conservative politicians, but as a constitutional certainty. So the Scottish Fabian suggests that the new Act of Union does the following. One, sets out the process for one part of the UK seceding. This could work very much like the process that the Conservatives absolutely loved in terms of pulling the UK out the EU. They could hardly object. They would, of course, because they're raging hypocrites, but they would have no grounds to do so. Secondly, it would need to set out clear rights and responsibilities, which avoids Westminster exceeding its authority over devolved matters, but also sets Westminster out as the UK seat of power. Third, it suggests that parliamentary democracy be strengthened and the use of referenda limited. So I would say on that last point, there are other things you could do. You could, for example, suggest that it would be useful to adopt the same systems as, say, Switzerland that uses referenda a lot. But I would agree you'd have one or the other. You either have a situation where, like Switzerland, you have measures in place to make sure that it really is the will of the people and that it's null and void if it turns out a central argument was a lie or just simply wrong. And what the Fabian suggests as well is if it's going to precipitate a change, it would need to be by a 2/3 majority. That, of course, would have made Brexit impossible. Now, for my money, a key part of meaningful devolution would be that no constitutional change should be possible without the consent of all separate administrations. And they're sort of in line with that because that's why they're talking about limiting the scope of referendum, not to use a referendum for this, that or the other. But when you want major constitutional change, it should require the consent of every single administration in the UK, which also would have made Brexit impossible. And if a situation existed where the English really wanted to leave the EU and were determined, and that was genuinely the will of the people, then the response would have been to leave the UK first, which of course wouldn't have happened because the English didn't really want to leave the EU. They just wanted something to change and wanted to give David Cameron a kick up the arse for being a dickhead. They just didn't realise that they were voting for even bigger dickheads. But the bottom line is that for all Boris Johnson's attempts to come up with a cunning wheeze to keep the union together, only real devolution based on genuine power sharing will work. What sort of infantile mind thought that having the Prime Minister holiday in Scotland was going to reverse the tide? People want representation, not a pat on the head. Looking at, honestly, I would love to have been in on that room. Looking at the polls, there's growing demand for a referendum on independence in Scotland because they really don't like the fact that you constantly ignore them. I know, Prime Minister, what you should do is go on holiday. What, like stay in a hotel? No, you rent a cottage. All right, okay. No, better still, get a tent. Well, I'm not sleeping in a tent. No, it'll be fine. Just put a tent up. You can sleep in the cottage. Just put the tent up. Knock and bandy it will. They'll be wanting to, stay in the union after that. What? I mean, as things stand, Scotland's having elections this May. Although the SNP seems to be having a few internal squabbles right now, I would argue, I mean, at a time where they've got serious opposition, you could argue that would be a major distraction for them and a major problem. But given that there isn't an obvious opposition to them in Scotland, I think that's unlikely to derail their ambition of winning an overall majority in the Scottish Parliament. And even if the internal infighting within, of course infighting's internal, the infighting in the SNP ended up bringing Sturgeon down, and I don't know how likely that is, it's not like her successor would do anything other than carry on with that general plan for pushing for a second independence, with the idea being, well, we've got a majority in the Scottish Parliament now, our central promise is a Scottish referendum, so we've got a mandate for that. And I noticed that Johnson's head of the task force charged with ideas to strengthen the union has resigned last week, but that makes little difference to me if the Conservatives are serious about the UK, and I say Conservatives because it's quite clear Boris Johnson is not, or he's not serious about anything, then they are going to have to move in completely the opposite direction to Boris Johnson. It's really this simple. Boris Johnson has caused moves towards a desire for independence, or at least a referendum. So you have to go in the opposite direction if you want the opposite effect. The Prime Minister's time in power has been characterised by centralising more and more power and frankly ignoring people around the UK. This concept of building an ivory tower around the levers of power does not inspire people. The Conservative and Unionist Party must either empower the union or preside over its demise. It's really that simple. Because I'm not really sure anyone else is going to get the chance. At this point, it's far from clear that Labour would be able to win in 2024, and also unclear whether they would have enough time to act even if they did. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.